the analogy that God created man for himself, and the relationship with God and his creation defines our understanding of God and that whole identity relationship.
So how does he deal with atheists? I mean, maybe it's one way. God, has a relationship with them, but or is it just they don't believe in God?
Well, from a religious perspective, even if there's no religious perspective, as an individual, your identity is inextricably tied to others. Whether or not there's a belief in a deity or not, that one cannot be an island unto himself.
Well, even saying that a person is an atheist is an identity also. And the denial of the deity is still a relationship with the deity.
And defines the individual.
Yeah.
Even though they deny God exists, that still defines who they are.
Exactly.
Their non-relationship with God, or their relationship with God as it is as a non-believer.
Right.
Yeah, everyone has a relationship with God, whether they believe in God or not.
Yeah.
But I heard that there are no atheists in foxholes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that too.
Interesting. Okay, go ahead, Dave.
And he says people no legitimate interests that are purely private or individual. So everything you do has interactions. And he says that the gospel necessitates that one of the core purposes of the church is the continuing of people towards God and towards one another. Which, of course, reminds me of Jesus' greatest commandment when he was asked what the greatest commandment is.
Oh, the Lord,
Like
God.
soul and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah. We need a little bit more of that around this world.
Yeah, right. Things like all wearing masks.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we only have 46 more days, hopefully.
Jeez. Yeah. Well,
I just hope we can make it.
tells the science deniers to recognize that wearing a mask reduces the spread, and to be willing to do that minor inconvenience for the sake of other human beings.
Well, in Kansas City, they had a surge, and the mayor, I guess, reluctantly issued a mandate to wear masks, so people did, and the infection rate went down like 25%.
Yeah. Well, I was in a conference yesterday. That's why I missed Brotherhood of St. Andrews. I had a medical conference in the morning, and they were showing multiple studies showing countries with mask mandates or states with mask mandates. Yeah, infectivity rate is lower and hospitalizations are lower. I mean, it's statistically easily provable that wearing a mask reduces the spread. So anyway. So Rowan says, Eucharist loses all meaning if we ever cut off from the pattern of God's mission in the world. And in the Eucharist, the church celebrates a gift that it never possesses, but always receives anew. And that our own identity lies beyond ourselves, so that every act of receiving the Eucharist is also a dispossession of whatever identity we have constructed for ourselves.
I miss getting Eucharist every week.
Yeah, me too. At least that was one nice thing about the outdoor service. We could still do that. Yeah. I don't think we'll have indoor services again for quite a few months. I'm hoping by spring we can do outdoor again.
by spring, we don't need to do either. No, we don't. We need back inside.
I hope so. I don't know. I hope so, bud. The church is not for itself, but for the sake of reconciled humanity. So another topic Rowan Williams has some interesting things to say about is saints. So a few things he has to say about saints. He says the saints embody something of Christ's kenosis. And kenosis is a theological term we encountered once recently with another topic. Kenosis refers to the self-emptying of Jesus's own will and becoming entirely receptive to God's divine will. It's an act of self-displacement. And in it, the self becomes more acute and distinctive, yet more elastic and expansive and capable of giving. And he says that, well, the saints do that. They are an example of kenosis, of emptying of themselves.
I guess that's we can experience that when we have a problem that's troubling us and we finally turn it over. We let it go, and then we're receptive to what comes next.
Right. Yes. That, and also when you put yourself aside to sacrifice your own needs for the needs of somebody else. That would also be an example. So the holiness of the saints is not an erasure of itself, but an intensification. And he uses an analogy of a musician's performance, where the musician becomes more gloriously herself as she allows her own ego to be completely transparent to the mind and the intention of the composer.
Wow, that's a beautiful analogy.
Yeah, I like that one. It's like, I guess, when a musician is in the zone, so to speak, let it, letting it flow.
Yeah, I thought that was a great example.
I think of Yo-Yo Ma when he's playing the cello and his eyes are closed and he's like just one with the instrument. It's,
Yeah, it's a great analogy. It's like he's transformed.
Right.
And he's expressing the intent of the composer of the music. And he's one with his cello. That is a perfect example of kenosis and what the saints do and how the saints embody and represent what Christ has done for us.
Another one is Perlman, the violinist.
The performer's kenosis is not an emptiness, but a true fullness, saturation, which one lovingly yields to another.
I need a little kenosis in my life.
Right. So Rowan also makes the point that saints are often not typically well-balanced, well-rounded people. Sometimes they're a little odd. They're often uneven, confused characters whose lives have been knocked off balance by the strange world of God. But God's power is made perfect in their weakness. And it is here where, in the most vulnerable and difficult dimensions of our experience, that God's kenotic omnipotence is most deeply and secretly at work. He even goes as far as to say that the lives of the saints are probably the most legitimate and concrete apologetics argument for the existence of God, by seeing the things they have done in their lives and their behaviors and their self-sacrifice. And studying and learning about the saints give us a picture of who God is.
Going back to that first bullet point about the saints not typically balanced, I think it's because they're focused. They're extremely focused on one thing, and they don't let the other things in the world get in the way of that focus, whatever it happens to be. And whereas the rest of us are, we're not necessarily focused on to the exclusion of other things. We have multiple focuses, I guess. Does that make any sense to
Yeah,
anybody?
I think so.
That's our judgment, being balanced and well-rounded.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about the statement that blah, 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 the lives of the saints are the only persuasive argument for the existence of God.
Well, it is hyperbole. It is exaggerate. You're right. I agree with that. It's not the only. I wouldn't use that word, but I think it is a persuasive argument.
And that's Williams.
It is a persuasive argument.
But I agree with you that it's not the only. I think that's extreme language to make.
Yeah.
Well, if I can say something, I did a lot of reading about St. Francis in preparation for doing an icon, a very large painting for the Franciscan soup kitchen. They asked me to do that for them, and it's 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide, or something.
Oh,
like
wow.
that. But anyway, I did want to read about him and get to know him before I painted it. And and that's the only saint that I have delved into their background, so I can't lay this description on it, every person that became a saint. But he was definitely a very unusual character in that if a psychiatrist got him, he'd want him on the couch for a long time. Well, I mean, he really was. They are so in their own space and connected to God that they really do not live, socialize like a normal person. I mean, not all of them, but he was just so unusual, and it was the most fascinating read I think I've ever read about a person and personality. But anyway, that's
He seemed to love to shed his clothes and run around the seesaw.
Really?
yeah.
Well, I know you love nature and animals, so
Yeah.
I guess that kind of fits in with that, right?
Oh, yes, he would take off all of his clothes and run around. But go ahead and say what
Well,
you were
that's
saying.
Jennifer's painting and her study led us to go on a trip to Assisi, which was very moving, very interesting.
Yeah, it was. And it was just wonderful to be in Assisi and see where he was and see their different representations in the churches there.
Yeah. He enjoyed sleeping on a rock. You could see where he slept, and
Really?
imagine that rock was pretty cold if he didn't have clothes on.
Yeah. Wow. Gee,
Yeah,
imagine.
Well, yeah, listen, I've been there, and St. Francis of Assisi was a very simple man at the end, living the life of a hermit, and he would have hated the fact there are actually 2 cathedrals, one on top of each other, to celebrate him. And they're very,
right.
very grandiose, not at all what you think St. Francis would have liked.
Hmm.
That's a bit of irony, isn't it?
Here,
It really is. You don't realize until you go to his place and see how simple life was and everything else, and you've just been at there's 2 cathedrals, one on top of each other, dedicated to him, that are full of grandiose, beautiful windows and everything else, but so unlike him.
once you're dead, then people can do with your memory whatever they want to, I guess.
Right.
True.
Maybe we'll build you a shrine, bud.
Hey.
A big donut.
There you go. I have 99 a dozen today, men and women.
Back on track.
So on the Trinity, what Rowan Williams has to say, here's an interesting thing that he quotes in one of his books. I read a couple of his books, actually. He refers to a Russian Orthodox priest named Pavel Florensky, who was a priest, mathematician, art historian, electrical engineer, inventor, and martyr.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? That's pretty amazing. He lived in the from 1882 to 1937, so not that long ago. And Pavel Florensky, Father Florensky, had said, there exists and the icon of the Trinity by Saint Andrei Rublev, therefore God exists.
Wow.
That was his
His logical,
Rationale.
right.
Yeah.
because a piece of art,
Apologetics, that's the word I was looking for. His apologetics was this icon exists, therefore God exists. And so in the icon, each figure draws our gaze and deflects it to the next character. Of course, this icon is supposed to represent the Trinity, obviously. And each figure draws our gaze and deflects it to the next character in the way that it's painted, which is one of the things the idea of the Trinity should do. There's a vacant seat there, which is supposed to be for us, or for you, each of us. And as they love each other infinitely within the Trinity, that love for each other is an excess of love that spills out towards us in ever widening circles. That's what Rowan Williams has to say about the icon and what it says to him. And that way, the Trinity itself, the relationship of Holy Spirit, is a sort of kenosis and reciprocity between each other. A continuously unending infinity of emptying of the three persons of God into each other that spills out to the rest of us. So that was Rowan Williams' kind of an original interpretation of the Trinity that had never been stated before. Very difficult to conceptualize and understand anyway, but this is his way of trying to put some meaning to it. To say that we love God is to abandon ourselves to the great landslide of self-displacement that is going on forever between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. If desire is deflected within God, then God is infinitely desirable, a reality we can encounter only in self-abandonment. Each of us is wholly bound up with God's relationship to God. The whole story of creation, incarnation, and our incorporation into Christ's body tells us that God desires us as if we were God. So that's how Rowan understands the Trinity, or interprets the Trinity. When he talks about Christian tradition, doesn't promise any human access to divine power. God's power is the source of radical human dependence. To depend for one's identity ultimately upon a hidden source of self-giving or self-sharing is to be as free as one can be within the tragic limits of the world. Finding the source of our being beyond ourselves is not alienating, but become a doorway into freedom and self-awareness.
Rob,
Was that, Jen?
I was going to say that every sentence that you have been projecting and reading I need to read a book. I need to read a book on every sentence, an explanation that's longer than the paragraph that sentence makes. I mean, it's just
It's
way
pretty-
too much here.
It's pretty deep stuff, isn't it?
Yes, and I don't think it translates well to the average person, how he's saying it. I mean, I would have to sit and think about each sentence, seriously. You know, he's a very deep thinker and maybe makes it more complicated than it is.
A Baptist would understand.
Yeah. Bud said a Baptist would understand it.
I like that second point there about self-giving and self-sharing is to be as free as one can be within the tragic limits of the world. That's where I think some of these people that we've elevated to sainthood, they represent, not all, but a lot of them represent the self-giving or self-sharing. I think of Mother Teresa, for instance, you know, working with the poor and the lepers in India, just as one example of that. I mean, I'm sure there are many others.
Not to harp upon Rowan Williams' interest in T.S. Eliot, but I've still been reading the book that I had bought of criticism of the four quartets. And one thing that has come out is that Eliot believed that what we learn and what is involved in our own, I don't know what, it's not perfection, but merely that as we age and allegedly grow wiser, we learn humility. We learn to give up ourselves. And that's very Eastern, you know, thinking, as well as in Christianity, to sacrifice for others, but giving up your ego. So that all goes with this, all these ideas that have been coming through here.
Right. Goes with the idea of kenosis. Sure.
In order to find oneself, one must lose oneself.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
You have to let go.
How hard is that?
I know. That old ego gets in the way so many times.
Right. Yeah, sure does. He says Christ is a stranger to us at times because we are trapped in a world of self-deception. I think also goes along with everything y'all were just saying. And even when he appears to us, we make him a screen on which our own desires can be projected, rather than seeing him as he is. And there's a process of discovering that yourself is not the center of things. And Rowan reminds us here that on the road to Emmaus, when Jesus appeared to the disciples, they did not recognize him until they broke bread together. In that same way, he appears to us as a stranger at times that we don't recognize he is there because we're too busy projecting ourselves onto him.
Unless we are in community with one another,
Right? Yeah, right.
we see God through others.
Yeah, community is an essential component of Christianity. I mean, you were talking about hermits earlier, Janice, and look what the hermits did eventually. They bound together in groups.
There's,
I watched a series this past couple of years called Alone, where they put people out in harsh conditions, survivalists, and they have to fend for themselves. And invariably, a majority of them finally give up because they are lonely and they miss their families. So they miss that sense of community. And so I identify with what we're saying here with that particular show that I watched.
You know, it seems that for an Anglican theologian, he sure does make us feel bad about ourselves. I mean, when I read it.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
It just means we have more work to do.
Right. So in this way, Jesus seems hidden from us because we are hiding from the truth. And we emerge from hiding not through any single moment of insight, but through a process of holy living. A process that takes years of self-reflection and contemplation. So we don't have to feel bad about ourselves. We just need to grow. So Rowan also talks about Holy Communion. It's not a reward, but like everything else about Jesus Christ, a free gift. Holy Communion, not because we are doing well, but because we are doing badly.
Well, it gives us an opportunity to, at that moment, be, one with the Creator.
Right.
Reflect on just that one moment and be open.
I agree with you, Rob. It's like a reset button.
That's why I miss it so much.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to love you and leave you. I'm going to get ready for the service.
Okay, Peter.
Okay, see you, Peter.
Yeah, it's about time.
It is about time. Okay. Well, seeing you all, talking with you all.
See you next week.
Okay.
Dave, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks,
Yes,
Dave.
David,
You bet.
thank you very much.
Yep. See you next week.
Everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Let go and let God. We'll see you.
Well.